excitement is building.
Well, welcome everybody. It's Friday morning, 10:30 a.m., and it's CEO Chat.
Time for CEO Chat.
Absolutely.
I'm Al Cini.
Al,
Joe,
good
it's
to see
always
you.
a pleasure working with you.
We have a great guest today.
I know. I've been looking forward to this interview.
Great. Mike Menninger.
This is exciting. Nice to meet you, Mike.
Mike Menninger,
Likewise.
you're founder and president of Menninger Associates, a financial planning place right here in New Jersey or
Yes,
Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania.
Here. And welcome again. This is the second time I've met you, and it's the first time Al's got a chance
Yep.
to meet you. So welcome to CEO Chat.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Good. One of the things we want to talk about at the beginning is you have a financial planning business a little bit different than other people. How would you like to explain that to us?
Well, a lot of people call themselves financial advisors. It's very generalized. And yes, we serve as financial advisors, but quite frankly, I think where we differentiate is we start with the planning first. And most financial advisors have a propensity to hone in on the assets because generally speaking, most of the pay and revenue that financial advisors receive are through asset management. So oftentimes when I meet with a client for the first time, I'll spend 3.5 hours with them and we don't even get to the assets.
You did mention before the program, it's planning first.
Right.
Planning first, absolutely.
That's a great strategy.
Well, it's not just planning, but it's education. You know, I wholeheartedly believe that education and knowledge are powerful. And what I try to do is as I'm interviewing, I'm gathering all of their information, but what happens is that as I'm gathering the information, I'm actually relaying it back to them and teaching them the world of finance as it directly applies to them with their stuff. So might be talking about, when I ask them, I always start with debts first, and I'll ask them, what your mortgage is, how much do you owe, what's the value of your home, and what's the interest rate, and what their term is, and if I see an opportunity for they could benefit from refinancing their mortgage, we jump right into that, and I talk about amortization charts and schedules and how mortgages work, and come up with some ideas that would benefit them right out of the gates.
Well, that's important. We're talking about families,
Yes.
obviously, so it would be ordinary people who might
Yes.
want help from you. But you also mentioned small business owners, self-employed people who
Yes.
often don't look around all the corners they need to look around, and that's where you come in and help them.
That's correct. There's a lot of different things. A business owner is the individual, as you indicated. But the business owner also has, he owns a business. And as a result, they just have one layer of added complexity. Whether they're self-employed or whether they have employees, they have a whole added level of complexity. And one of the things that also comes into play is tax planning. And that's clearly where I differentiate myself from a lot of the other financial planners. Actually, I'm very well versed in the tax law and tax planning. In fact, I give seminars on tax planning, and oftentimes given the seminars to CPAs in the audience.
Wow.
And I've actually had CPAs come up to me either after the seminar, during the seminar, or everything, and just be wowed by a different way of looking at the
Right.
same thing that they do every day.
Right.
And it's great. I just love
And in
teaching.
practical terms, there's a huge difference at the end of the year between a $50,000 tax bill and a $5,000 tax bill.
That is correct.
And that's how much of a difference you can make.
Well, not really that way, but it really comes down to tax planning. Because sometimes you bite the bullet up front because of the fact that in the end, it's going to pay off in the end.
Right.
So really what you're looking at is anytime you're dealing with folks, you need to get your arms around their tax picture today. But from a planning perspective, I don't want to look at just this year or last year. I take a look at various time horizons in the future. Because inevitably you can always break down somebody's life into periods of time.
Right.
It could
Okay.
be the period of time with which they have children, the period of time between children and retirement, the period of time between taking Social Security and the time with which they have to take money out of their IRAs. And then there's inevitably, potentially the period of time where one of them is going to be widowed.
Right.
So you're looking at each of these different time horizons and you're evaluating where the tax brackets are today as to where you project
Where you
they could
project
be
them.
later.
That's important.
Because we're in the lowest income tax bracket structure that we've been in for 100 years at least.
Really?
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
Wow. And yeah, I mean, wherever there's an opportunity to take advantage of that, you want to do that.
Absolutely.
Some people, many, especially independent business people, are so busy in their business.
Of course.
That they never have time to work with somebody on their business.
That's correct.
And
That's
that's
correct.
where you come in.
That's correct.
I think that's a really valuable contribution. Terrific.
I have fun with it. And, it kind of projects
Is that
itself
important
out.
to you having fun with it?
Of
'Cause
course. Are
it's,
you kidding me? as sappy as it may sound, I really like helping people.
Okay.
But when I'm with them, believe me, I'm always smiling and joking
You're
around and everything
definitely
else.
a people person. There's no doubt about that. And I
Well,
think that's,
But I'm telling you, I can have a 3.5-hour meeting with folks. I'm usually capable of gauging when their eyes are glazing over.
Right.
But it's remarkable that if you keep them engaged, which I do, and you're teaching them, people want to know and people want to learn, and they can go to 3.5 hours. I mean, I think about, the days when I was in class, I would be looking at my watch, trying to get through that 45 minutes. They're loving it. They're loving it. And I enjoy it. I mean, it's silly. This is my second career, and I just can't get enough of it. And
what was your first career?
I was an engineer.
Oh, really? No kidding.
Yeah, I'm a recovering engineer, so to speak. Which also, quite frankly, makes me different. My educational background in my first 12 years of my career were in environmental engineering consulting. And then I switched to financial planning after 12 years, and I've been doing that for 20 years. And, when people look at me, they say, wow, that's a big change. I'm like, actually, on the contrary, it's probably about a 75% overlap.
Really? No kidding. Because you're really a financial engineer.
To a great extent, yes. In fact, it's systematic and analytical approach to problem solving. The other 25%, a small portion of it is just changing the subject material, but you cannot ignore emotions.
Which is a big part of the conversation you have
Oh, absolutely.
with all your clients, because people have very strong feelings about
Absolutely.
about their money and their assets, definitely.
Absolutely. And, right, wrong, or indifferent, emotions can get in the way of making good logical decisions.
Always do. Yeah, that makes sense.
So we try to help them, but also take recognition and be cognizant of there are emotions there.
Well,
Okay, and while we may realize that there may be certain things that are better, we also understand fundamentally you can't get somebody to do something that's totally out of their comfort zone.
Right, especially if you're working with a wife and a husband, I would think. I think
that happens.
When that kind of happens, you really kind of have to be like a mediator.
It's funny you say that. I've actually had people call me so that I could, I want to prove that he or she is wrong, that I am right. And what's remarkable is, you can't get into that game because obviously there's a no-win there.
Yeah. Right.
But again, you sit down and you try to educate, and you ask both of them questions as to their understanding of things, what their goals and objectives are, and oftentimes you can develop goals or develop strategies that appease to two very different.
make them both
Absolutely.
comfortable with the solution.
Absolutely.
Actually, in a lot of couples, I'm thinking they probably agree with each other more than they know they do. You help them find the areas where they
Correct.
actually agree.
Correct.
Because it's subjective. It's not an art. It's a science. You're an engineer.
It's both,
you're not
actually.
Really?
It
Talk
is
about
both.
that a little bit. That's interesting.
Oh, you're going to ask me to talk about art? I'll talk about the science.
Well, I know
Yeah,
money seems like something cold. We always use the phrase cold, hard cash.
Right.
But when you wrap your emotions around it, there's a little bit more to it.
Well, there's a
than-
lot of art, and that's where the art comes in. Okay, and the art comes into developing strategies that will also formulate the ability to have them feel comfortable with what you're doing. Furthermore, an art, I suppose, could be that I believe one of the most important components of financial planning is to create flexibility.
Right.
Inevitably, the only thing that we can guarantee about life is it's not guaranteed. You can have tax law changes, you can have, not that this could ever possibly happen, but we've had 3 major catastrophic events in 20 years that nobody could have ever planned for.
Never thought about
Well, 9/11,
Right.
who'd have thought that somebody was going to decide to take and use airplanes as missiles?
Right.
And then we had the global financial crisis, and now the pandemic. Who would have ever predicted?
that one's out of the blue.
Right, exactly. And
Totally.
so, when you develop their financial plan that has a multitude of flexibilities built in, then it enables them to go through bad times without having bad results.
Without having, well, see, now that's resilience. And like you said, it's kind of business continuity. How do you keep going even when everybody's trying to get you to stop? When everything is coming to an end, how do you find a beginning? I think it's great that you can help people do that.
Well, and you got to get them to buy into.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's also part of the reason why I like to educate. So most of my time, again, if I read and get to know their goals and objectives, but some of the hard facts, if you will, like their income, their assets, their debts.
Right.
And as I'm regurgitating it all back to them, they're getting to understand. because while I'm doing the entire meeting, I'm also on a pad of paper writing down a long list of strategies and recommendations, which oftentimes goes into 2 pages.
Right.
Once I'm done with the meeting, we've talked about everything along the way, but once we're done with the meeting, I photocopy it, push it in front of them and say, okay, let's go through this list again. And many of the recommendations are clearly logical. Some of them are, you need to find more information out. What's your company match and how does this work? And what types of insurance do you have? But at the end of the day, when you make recommendations that they understand why is a big word.
Definitely.
They understand why they're doing what they're doing, they're a lot more apt to embrace it as opposed to just how Mike said so.
See, now that makes you a quarterback on the team, which is really,
Absolutely.
really a big deal. Now,
Absolutely.
I want to ask one more bread and butter question
Sure.
before we get into that quarterbacking thing, because I think that's where you really stand out. If I have an accountant, you'll work with my accountant.
Oh, absolutely.
You're not an accounting firm.
No.
Okay, but you will work with my accountant if I have an accountant.
Oh my gosh, absolutely.
And you do that all the time. That's
Absolutely. I
routine.
think, I'm a firm believer in 2 heads are better than 1.
Right.
Okay. The accountant does his thing in tax preparation, does less on the tax planning side. I understand the taxes, and quite frankly, I don't want to do taxes. It's a hassle. Not to mention they got the software. They know more about taxes than I do.
Right.
I'm not ever going to dispute that. But their angle and the way they look at it is vastly different than the way I look at it. So I look at it very futuristic. Okay, from a planning perspective. They have a propensity to look at it today. And oftentimes, and I call it going to battle with the accountant. It's not really that way.
Right.
Because, we talk
There'll
about
be a
it.
discussion, there could be differences of opinion.
Absolutely.
But we
absolutely.
work those out.
Oh my gosh, yes. And so when you put 2 heads together,
Yeah.
particularly when we have overlap, but thinking at it and viewing it from different angles,
Right.
what happens is, at the end of the day, the client's the winner.
Well, but I one more bread and butter question. There are people out there who may not have an accountant. They might do their own filing.
And that's fine too.
But they still need you, and you can still work with them.
Absolutely.
And in fact, they're probably the people that need you the most because they just think it's a mechanical process. They don't understand that there's a long-term runway they need to plan.
That's true. That's true.
Good.
That's true. And I do help with them. In fact, sometimes I've actually taken a look at their tax returns and have found mistakes. There's a lot of folks who, they use TurboTax, which I think is a terrific program. Absolutely.
Sure.
And what I encourage them to do, I said, send me your draft tax return before you actually push the send button because I'm trusting that he's punching in the data correctly. But inevitably, I've caught errors because they're misplaced or I'm finding penalties or things just in the wrong spot and therefore are taxed differently or incorrectly or whatever the case may be. And then I kick it back to them and say, hey, you need to take a look at this. And then they fix it.
Wow.
Right. We got to take a break right now.
We do, I heard.
But we're going to come right back with you, Mike.
I can't
and
wait to
talk-
come back. This is a
Absolutely.
fun conversation.
Good.
Absolutely. We'll be right back. Stick around.
Thank you.
My best to make everything succeed.
By the ocean.
Hippity hop.
Now that's New Jersey. 130 miles of beautiful beaches, solid rock, and everything in between.
Look in the window.
Now that's New Jersey. Plan your New Jersey trip at visitnj.org. Waves of fun. Nights of excitement. And a trail of memories. Now that's New Jersey.
Tell me what is my life like to love? Tell me who.
Well, welcome back to CEO Chat. My name is Joe Asumendi,
I'm Al Cini.
and our guest is Mike Menninger.
What a guy.
Mike,
Still.
Menninger Associates, how are you?
I'm very well. Thank you again.
Good to have you back with us. One of the things I wanted to talk about, I thought you were very interested. You talk about tax attorneys saying that the future is now, is what they think. Well, you think the future is the future.
That is
That's the way you differentiate what you do and what a tax accountant does.
Right.
Is that correct?
I would say yes.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about your business, your associates, some of the people you work with you, and go into that a little bit.
Okay. Well, I started my firm 20 years ago. Really, my firm was just me. It was the Mike Menninger Show for plenty of years until I hired my first employee. And it was either 2013 or 14, I don't remember. And actually, believe it or not, the purpose of hiring him was thinking already ahead about business succession planning. But I hired him, and then I hired an administrative assistant, and next thing you know, I'm up to 9 people already.
Oh, okay.
So a lot of that growth has occurred over, I'd say, the last, 2 or 3 years. But a year ago, another gentleman from our firm, Voya Financial Advisors, was looking to retire and had approached the mother company and said, who in this area might be someone you'd recommend. The company recommended that he speak with me. Our relationship has been nothing but perfect.
Oh, that's great.
So I've basically merged his firm into mine and going through the process of transitioning his clients from him to us.
the firm.
Oh, wow.
Right. So he's going through a shorter duration business succession plan of about 2 years
Right.
until he drifts off into the sunset.
Okay.
What I also have, I have a relationship with Temple University because I teach down there as a guest professor in their financial planning program.
Right.
And what I do is I pick kids out that are graduating from Temple. And what I like to do is I'll bring them in for either a summer between their junior and senior year or as an intern during the course of the year,
Right.
serving effectively as a part-time employee, which enables both of us to kick the tires.
Sure.
Okay.
Good.
And that's been
And then grow them into the firm.
absolutely.
Actually, you brought up an interesting subject, which I know is another sweet spot for you: succession and transition planning.
Yes. Yes.
People out there are figuring they're going to live forever. Everybody does. Joe's becoming more realistic about that lately.
He looks like he's already lived forever.
I think, but I mean, there are an awful lot of people out there who just don't think in terms of
Right.
what their next chapter might be, and that's where you could really help out, isn't it?
Right. Well, absolutely. Adage goes, people don't plan to fail, they fail to plan.
Right.
And business succession planning is something that is very important to a small business owner. And, I'm 55 and I'm figuring I've got about 10 to 15 years. Now, being a financial planner, it's not like getting up on the roof
Give
or
yourself
swinging
another
an
5
axe.
years.
Well,
Go on.
but it's
Take it on me.
physically speaking, it's not hard.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
so it's not climbing up a ladder every
Sure,
day,
sure.
swinging an axe.
Which a
it's-
lot of your clients do. And
well,
they
yeah,
have to think
absolutely,
about that.
absolutely.
Right.
But business owners, and I know a lot of the folks that you have in your show are very small
Right.
business owners, and the thing is that when you retire, and there's 2 ways of getting out of your business. There's voluntarily and involuntarily, right?
Head first and feet first.
Right.
Yes.
So I prefer the voluntary.
Yes.
Okay, but from an involuntary perspective, what if? What if I died? What if I became disabled?
Right.
Yeah.
So there are certain planning things that you really ought to be doing to cover for that, which I have in place.
And insurance. Let's talk about that.
Insurance
because
is
that's
one way of doing
one
it.
of the instruments that you have
That is
to
correct.
help people with that.
That is correct.
Okay.
That is correct. But then the second piece is, that doesn't, if you're a sole business owner and you die, the insurance does nothing but pays the family back for the value of the business, but the business does not continue.
No.
You need people to continue the business. So the route that I'm taking is I'm on a 10 to 15 year plan. Okay, thought about it about 5 years ago. I'm implementing it now. And how I'm implementing it is that I'm hiring kids, call them kids, it's amazing. They're kids because they're my age, or my kids' age. But I'm hiring them right out of college,
Right.
okay, or very soon after. And what that does is I'm grooming them over the course of the next 10 to 15 years, hopefully, for me to pass all of my knowledge on to them. I encourage every single one of them to get their CFP, which in my opinion is, it's unequivocally the highest level
Certified
designation.
financial planner.
That is correct,
Right.
certified
Okay.
financial planner. It requires a tremendous amount of knowledge and application of it
Right.
and intelligence. So to get it, it's not a lot of people have it.
You just brought up another subject that I think is fascinating to me. Normally, people think about financial planning as something you do when you're in your 50s. There are people out there in their 30s, late 20s and 30s, who are launched.
Oh, yeah.
Who really are not talking, they're not thinking about any of this.
No, it's
What's
true.
your message to a kid who thinks this is what their parents do, not what they do?
Well, the kids should really get on the ball for, again, they're going through phases of life.
Right.
The kid could be young and single. Okay, they could be now having a family. And then the next phase is when family's taken off. And by the way, when the kids leave the house, it's your biggest raise.
I'm
But
sure.
so the kids, you really need to get them to understand investing.
Right.
Really?
Okay, even if it's just making small contributions to their 401k. Little anecdote here is if you had two twin brothers, okay, at the age of 22, the one brother decides he's going to put $2,000 a year into his 401k for 8 years, not even counting match.
Right.
And then you have the other brother who thinks that $2,000 is better served towards fast cars and beer and women.
I'm going to have fun with it.
Right.
Right.
At the end of that 8 years,
Right.
then he decides he's going to start contributing.
Right.
And the first one stops.
Has an 8-year. Okay, it's interesting. Yeah, tell me.
So
about
at the end of age 65, by the time they turn 65,
Uh-huh.
the son or the brother that contributed consistently between age 22 and 30
Yeah.
has more money than the other one who went from
Who did-
30 to 65.
No, even though
Really?
the first twin stopped
Right.
when the other one
Correct.
started.
Correct.
So the earlier you start, the more money you have
Absolutely.
at the end.
Absolutely. Because, one of the things that I've found... and
Nobody
it's-
knows this. No
it's-
kids don't know this.
It's the compound, it's the power of compounding interest.
Really? Well,
So what I've found, and this job is so cool, it's really cool. What I have found is that you have different demographics. And the demographics are, you people in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, and your 50s. But what I found is when you get to 60, it's in the late 50s and early 60s
yeah.
that there's a big transition in thinking. It's when people begin to get tired and tired of it.
Oh,
And
interesting.
so what I find happening a lot of times is that people just want to get out and retire at roughly the age of 60, but they're kind of stuck because Medicare doesn't kick in until they're 65.
Right.
So if people were to be starting early, it puts them in a much, much better position when they're age 60
Right.
to be able to control their own destiny, to be able to say, you know what, I'm working because I want to work, not because I have to work.
Wow.
And let me tell you, that's where starting early can make all the difference
make
in
a
the
huge
world later.
difference.
Absolutely.
See,
Are young people
that's-
buying into that? That's interesting because you're right. Are you finding the young people right now are buying into that concept?
No. Here's what's interesting is that from an investing perspective, what you're finding the young people are scared of investing because they're the
Really?
product of the 2008.
Right. Okay.
The
yeah.
financial
So,
crisis.
right, that's correct. So the financial crisis, you figure when they were high school and
Right.
getting out of high school, this is when the markets were down 50% in a 15-month period.
Right.
All of a sudden, they're like, wow, I don't want to invest because look at what happened. That's what they have their experience with.
Right.
Wow.
Wow. So part of that education that you offer really is, it's funny because I can't imagine a 22-year-old getting on the phone and calling you.
Right.
Yeah.
But I can think of a couple of hundred 22-year-olds who oughta.
Right.
And
Oh,
really,
absolutely.
they should just get on the phone and call you and say, you know what, Mike, I think I need to talk about this because nobody's ever explained it to me.
Absolutely. I encourage clients to introduce me to their kids because of the fact that it helps the children grow. And many of my clients want me to.
They want
Right.
you to.
Absolutely.
Well, because I'm
Because
not
they
listening
see-
to my parents. I never do, but I'll listen to you.
Well, of course, your parents don't know what they're talking about. They see the value in the education that the parents do, see the value in what I provide. They want their kids to learn it too because unfortunately, in the United States education system, they don't talk very much
There is no
about
financial awareness training
None.
at all
None.
in the public education
You know,
system.
that's
You're
real
right.
important because when I was a kid, I had my own bank account.
Right.
I 25 cents a week or whatever.
Oh, writing checks when I was 19.
Right, but I
Right.
did that.
Right.
And I don't think kids are getting that education now.
No, they're not.
They're not.
As far as I know.
So they're not being prepared for when they get older because everybody thinks
No.
they're going to live forever.
They use magic cards to buy things with.
Right.
or
Right,
Apple
exactly.
Pay.
Just a piece of
Yeah.
plastic. This is where you get money from. You just go to
and
this
their parents
machine.
fund it. Often their parents just put money in that account for them. So money is a mystery to them.
Well, balancing checkbooks are something that we've all done.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah,
for years.
right.
They don't balance checkbooks.
They don't figure they have to.
Right.
Yeah,
And they
figure
just
they'll
got to
get
make
a sticker.
sure.
The bank will let me know when I ran out.
Right, exactly. Or
That's a good day.
or they look at their ATM card
Right.
or their bank whatever, and they
Yeah,
just
yeah,
look
yeah.
online. And by the way, it's just differences, and you have to be aware of the differences because how the millennials think is different than how our generation thinks.
And you got to
Exactly,
respect
right.
that.
That's absolutely.
You have to respect that. You can't change that. That's
That's
important.
correct.
And they have a perspective on it that we can learn from in some ways.
But they're more apt to learn about online applications and different apps that they can
They're
use
gonna-
on their phone, right?
right,
Exactly.
right, right.
And so you kind of have to teach to that. But then again, that's what's also really good about having a young group of folks in my firm.
Right.
Because when I'm dealing with people who are in the younger generation, it really helps for me to assign some of my junior staff
Somebody
to
in their
work with
20s
them.
or 30s
Absolutely.
to say, I was where you are, and
Or I am
understand,
where
or
you
I
are.
am where you are.
Right, that's
That-
correct. They
That
understand
makes it
that.
relatable. You
Absolutely.
love this, don't you?
Yeah,
Oh my
they-
gosh.
And they're familiar with it. Kids will be more familiar with their peers than they will with older adults.
Absolutely.
That
they,
makes sense.
They relate to it because I'm like their parents.
Right, exactly.
You know?
Well, up to a point.
Well, yeah, yeah, right,
Up to the
exactly.
point where they hit you up for a couple $100.
Well, which is good.
But it's obvious to me that you really enjoy what you do.
I do.
I mean,
I do.
you know, and it's not. It doesn't have to be a chore. It doesn't have to be a drudge. It can actually be enjoyable. I mean, we're going to see things that maybe we'd prefer not to see, but we don't have to make that a painful experience. That could be a
Right.
very enlightening experience. I think it's great that people can call you that as a terrific resource. I think.
Oh, and that's what I do. I mean, I tell people, I say, look, you know what? Call me. I mean, you know, if it's when you're a business owner, you really work 24/7. Okay. And I tell people who respect and I appreciate they respect my time.
Right.
But if they have an issue that is really pressing, that it's bothering them enough to pick up the phone and call me at 7:30 at night,
Right.
then it's important enough for me to answer the phone and answer their question.
Yeah.
Because it's obviously important to them.
Well, we're at that point in our program where you get to tell everybody how to reach you. I'm thinking there are an awful lot of people out there flying a plane that has their family in it, that has their assets in it. You need a co-pilot. Don't fly alone.
Yes.
And so, Mike, if you look in your camera, tell everybody how to get a hold of you.
My name is Mike Menninger. Again, I'm a certified financial planner. I have 2 offices located in Delaware Valley. My main office is in Trooper, which is outside of the Norristown, King of Prussia area. And I have a secondary office also in Feasterville. Check out my website. I encourage you to check out my website. It is www.maaplanning.com, which is Menninger and Associates, MAA. So it's www.maaplanning.com. We can also be reached on our number at 610-422-3773. And we absolutely look forward to helping you. If anybody calls, we'll spend 15 to 30 minutes on the phone with you trying to identify what it is that you're trying to accomplish. And from that point, we take the next step.
Joseph, you were right. He's a great guest.
Absolutely. You know-
I really enjoyed this interview.
Absolutely. You know, people buy from people they know, like, and trust, and you fill all those up.
you
Well, thank you.
Check all those
Thank you very
boxes.
much. Appreciate
It's a
it.
pleasure having you on the program.
Thank you.
was a pleasure.
It was a pleasure.
Good.
This
It's
half
always a
hour went
pleasure.
fast.
It does. And
Yeah,
thanks
and,
all of you for joining us today on CEO Chat. My name is Al Cini.
I'm still Joe Asumendi.
Thanks again, Mike, for joining. Mike
Thank
Menninger.
you.
And we'll be back again next week with another CEO Chat.
Good. Stick around, have a nice weekend, and be safe and kind to each other.
Bye now.
Thank you.